Hello, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today, where I'm going to be putting two watches head to head. Two watches that should never be put head to head, because I have myself here a Mido Ocean Star 200, a beautiful dive watch. It's an automatic watch. And then I'm going to be putting it against my Longines Conquest Silver Dial quartz dress watch. So we have ourselves a dress watch versus a dive watch, a quartz versus an automatic. I am not wearing a watch right now because whichever one of these wins this little video is the one I'm going to be wearing. So let's go and see which one comes out on top. Now, before I go fully into the video, if you take just a moment to subscribe to the channel, it'd really help me out. Now, I'm going to do my wristwatch check and my drinks check. Apart from I have no wristwatch on my wrist, so I'm going to be doing just a drinks check today, and it's a lovely damson gin with some tonic water. Let's take a sip. It's a little bit sharp actually. I did put a decent amount in, but it's not overpowering. You have to taste the tonic, still not a fan of that. But it's quite decent actually, it's quite refreshing. It's a lovely summer day now. I mean, when I started the recording it was quite cloudy, but it's beautiful now. So yeah, quite refreshing on this day, so cheers. Okay, so let's, wow, the weather just keeps changing. But let's get started with the video, shall we? So let's start off with the case diameter. These watches are actually very similar in case diameter. The Longines is actually 41mm, with the Mido being 42.5mm. But putting them face to face like this, it's very hard to tell the difference, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I think the Longines may be slightly smaller, but it's very hard to tell the difference. So they're about equal there. Now, the depth rating. This is actually very interesting because this is the Mido Ocean Star and this is a dive watch, something that's meant to go into the sea and be worn on the wrist of divers. This is a Longines Conquest dress watch. Now, this is literally meant to be worn with a shirt or, you know, just casually. And this has more water resistance than the dive watch. So this has 300 meters water resistance. This has 200. Yeah, that's kind of funny actually. But to be honest, you're never going to go that far down, not really, so it's sort of just a bit of a flex. The fact that this Longines can look so damn good and be a dress watch, but also outcompete a dive watch in its own sort of realm of expertise. I love that fact. So as far as complications go, both of these have got complications apart from the second hand. So the Longines actually has an interesting complication. Being a quartz movement, it has a low battery indicator. So when your battery starts to run low, it will stop ticking every second and do it every few seconds. So just to let you know that you're going to need to change the battery soon. It also has a date complication, so you know, just useful stuff. The Mido has a date complication and a day complication, so you can know the day of the week and the date of that day. So yeah, very nice, sort of comparable. I'd probably say that the Mido has a little bit more function, but the Longines is obviously more accurate, so it's a bit of a draw there. I mean, this video is never going to define a true winner because they're so different, but yeah, I'd say that it's about an even there. So something I didn't even realise before I started making this video was that both of these watches are thin watches that are the same thickness. I had no idea that they're both 11.8mm. So they are perfectly matched in that aspect. Now, the Longines would traditionally be thinner than that, like the Mido, but because it's got the extra water resistance, it's going to be slightly thicker than it should be for a quartz movement. But the Mido is quite thin for actually being an automatic movement, so they're exactly even, which is actually really interesting. And neither of these has a display case back because the Mido would then be thicker, and the Longines has nothing to display because it's a quartz movement. So they both have engraved casebacks. That's quite interesting actually, because they are very different casebacks. The Longines being a lovely hourglass with great detail showing the Longines logo, whereas the Mido has a beautiful starfish on the back of it. And I have to say, they are really hard to decide between because I mean they're both beautiful, but I actually do prefer the Mido in this one. I think that like starfish is absolutely beautiful, and if I wanted an imprint left on my wrist, it would be the starfish. So Mido for the win there. Now something else, the case finishing. So the Longines clearly a dress watch, so it should be quite shiny, quite beautiful, and the Mido is quite functional, so it's sort of a brushed finish. But I have to give the Longines the win here because it's got just that extra bit of detail where it's just polished to absolute perfection, whereas the Mido, it has got a tiny little chamfer running down the side of the lugs, but it's nothing to write home about, and I would have to give the win here to the Longines. So you keen-eyed viewers may have noticed that the Mido is not on a bracelet, whereas the Longines is. But both of these watches do come on bracelets, so why is one on a bracelet and one's not? Does this one have a better bracelet than this? To be honest, no. Both of these watches have pretty terrible bracelets for different reasons. The Mido's is quite clunky, quite thick, quite cumbersome. It's not amazing. It doesn't really fit the style of the watch in my opinion. The Longines has no micro adjust really. It only has half links and is a butterfly clasp, so it's not fully secure in comparison to something with a actual hatch on the end of it, but it is a dress watch. But the reason I actually do have this watch on a bracelet and this one not is because it's the style of the watch. I think that the dress watch, it looks good on a bracelet or maybe a leather, but this one really does actually suit the bracelet, whereas this looks so much better on a canvas strap. So I have to say that the bracelet's equally bad and nothing really else to say on that. So let's go on to the bezels, because one has a dive time bezel and the other one has a smooth bezel. Both of these are beautiful in their own aspects. The dive time bezel is obviously more functional because it can time things, but the smooth bezel suits the watch and is definitely more dressy, so very even there. And going on to price, because I haven't mentioned price yet, they're both under £1,000 and relatively around the same price bracket, so quite comparable there. Now the only other real thing to talk about is actually the fact that these watches have both got quite poor legibility. I mean, the Longines is not really meant for legibility, it's just a dress watch, so it's not going to be used at an arm's length under the sea, whereas the Mido is meant to be quite legible, and it has got ever so slightly thicker hands, and it's slightly more legible because it also has got luminescence compared to the Longines that doesn't. So I'd have to give the Mido the win here, because even though it's not a very good dive watch for legibility, I mean, it's definitely better than the Longines that has no luminescence and it's got slightly thinner hands, especially the second hand. So Mido for the win there, and that's really all there is to compare against. So I'm going to talk about the pros of these watches individually, what I like about them individually, because to be honest, I cannot decide really on a winner. So let me just talk about the pros of each one, and then I'm going to draw a conclusion on which one I'm going to put on my wrist. Okay, let's start off with the Longines. So the Longines Conquest is a beautiful dress watch, there's no real doubt about it. It has some nice angular edges, and it's almost like the design team behind the watch were trying to print out the dial and actually did a typo saying 30 meters of water resistance and changed it to 300. And just before they deleted it off, the engineering team stepped in and said, no, we can make this work. And that's why it seems to overperform just massively. But it really is a great watch and just an absolutely gem to have in the collection. Now let's go on to the Mido. Now overall the Mido is a fine watch, but it really hasn't got a lot to say about itself. There's only two standout features for me, and that is the back of the case back. I really love that starfish, and the handset, particularly the hour hand and the minute hand. I really love the design of these. It's almost sort of AP Royal Oak mixed with just a bit of that sort of Ulysse Nardin like blue shark. It's just an amazing combination, and I really love the handset on this watch. So in conclusion, which watch am I going to wear today on my wrist? The Longines Conquest and the Mido Ocean Star. They're both on my wrist. They're just too good and I just can't decide between them. Let me know in the comment section down below which one you would choose if you had to pick one. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. That's this video. Goodbye.